Welcome to GoldenEye, Illuminati Space Wars Episode 1. I'm going to be starting a new series of videos on my channel that are going to be covering all of the news about war in space and how space technology is being militarized in secret against international treaty, as no one else is seemingly covering this in the conspiratard movement that is basically focusing on flat Earth and not paying any attention to the militarization of space and how close we are to a World War III that will be started by something being blown up in space. So let's actually pay attention to reality and look at what's actually going on in our outer atmosphere and in our low Earth atmosphere with the addition of many militarized satellites and now the advancement of anti-satellite technology. So we're going to start out by looking at how they're going to see the battlefield in the future with Space Fence. So every commander always starts out by looking at the battlefield and generally going to a high point so he can see the entire battlefield. And you can't do that with space because there is no high point. So what they've done is they've built two ground-based S-spaced arrays which are going to analyze the sky, one in the northern hemisphere and one in the southern hemisphere because the Earth is spherical. And these new S-based radar arrays are going to analyze the sky and be able to track any objects, including debris and anything that's launched into space. So say if China launches an anti-satellite missile, they'll be able to track it right to its original source, which they cannot do at this point. So right now, if a US military satellite was knocked out of the sky, they would have pretty much no idea where it came from, or very little idea, and they may retaliate by attacking the wrong country. So this is actually a very important thing for the military strategically to have, so they have a view of the entire battle space. But of course, just like the Ring of Power in the Lord of the Rings films, anything with this type of surveillance technology that can basically view the entire Earth and everything operating outside the Earth can be used for good or evil purposes. And based on who's running our country, it'll likely be used for the evil purposes. So Lockheed Martin, who we've covered on this channel before, is the company building the Space Fence program. And basically it's going to use two of the largest S-band phased radar arrays ever created in two different places on Earth in order to see everything in the sky. And because the world is spherical, they need two of these, one for the northern hemisphere and one for the southern hemisphere. And it's basically extremely important for them to start building this thing because they're worried about the anti-satellite missiles that multiple countries are developing, and if they don't build the space fence, they won't know where the anti-satellite missiles were launched from, and then we could get into war with the wrong country. So General Dynamics built the first one of these radar arrays, and it's a huge structure that's built with the precision of a medical instrument. So in this article, which came out in August 14th of 2015, they're discussing the real-life possibility of a World War III kicking off by an attack in space, and the recent addition of Chinese and Russian anti-satellite missiles are leading the fear propaganda for this new technology. Testifying before Congress earlier this year, James Clapper, the head of the National Intelligence, said there's a growing threat to US satellites, and China and Russia are developing capabilities to deny us access to our satellites in a conflict. And China in particular has demonstrated the need to interfere with, damage, or destroy US satellites. And that began with the Chinese anti-satellite missile tests that began in 2007. Now, there are many ways to destroy satellites, the best one just being throwing up a bunch of junk into the outer atmosphere. But also a spacecraft could simply approach a satellite and spray paint over its optics, knock out its antenna, or anything like that. That might be the main purpose of the X-37B secret spacecraft. It's not secret if I know about it, that they've launched and that China and Russia are fairly worried about. Now, the Obama administration has increased the budget from $20 billion to $25 billion over the next 5 years to enhance the militarization of the US Space Force. The article reads on, the prospect of war in space is not new. It stems from the Cold War, where the US feared that the Soviets were building nuclear weapons that could be launched from outer Earth orbit back at the Earth. So the US began testing anti-satellite weaponry in the late 1950s. until the United Nations Outer Space Treaty of '67, which banned the use of any weapons of mass destruction in outer space. Now, that's important because if there was any weaponry up there like low energy nuclear reactions powering a directed energy weapon, that would be in direct violation of this treaty, and we have proof that that exists because of 9/11 and because of what happened in Tianjin, China at the Tianjin blast, which was clearly something shot from space. Now, the militarization, according to this article, peaked with the Reagan administration's SDI program dubbed Star Wars. Now, that program was not the peak. We're looking at the peak of militarization now, and it's just getting more and more apparent. But one of the major things the SDI program created was laser weaponry for mobile application use. Now, they needed lasers in outer space in order to destroy the anti-satellite missiles and things like that, and the ICBMs, because you can't lift payload up to a satellite, so getting missiles up to a satellite is almost impossible. Hence the development of laser technology, most notably HEL lasers, which I've covered before. Now, the greatest threat to the military satellites is still just space junk. Satellites, because they move at such high speed, basically the easiest way to kill one is just to have something run into it. Something the size of, a marble could destroy a multi-billion-dollar satellite if it just hit it. So they really do need to track the objects in space in order to make sure that whatever took out their satellite was actually, from another country, not just some space junk that got created by accident. And we don't end up in a World War III scenario based on an accident. So in 2007, when China launched a missile that destroyed one of its own weather satellites, they created a sixth, that's right, 1/6 of all the debris in space in low Earth orbit was created by one missile test from China. And now they're doing even more missile tests, but they're not actually hitting satellites. But, the more China tests these anti-satellite capabilities, the more the US is going to be fearful of a war in space. In May of 2013, the Chinese escalated those fears by sending a missile into the area of the geosynchronous satellites. And basically for the US military, that was a wake-up call because they didn't think anyone would actually attack that stuff, and now they realize someone might actually go up after the military technology in the geosynchronous orbit. And my prediction is they have stuff even further out than that I talked about in The Lost Truth, my book I wrote, but I don't have any proof that there's anything further out than that, just a hunch. Now, they're saying that because the Chinese did this, they declassified the Geosynchronous Space Situational Awareness Program, which is a set of 4 satellites capable of monitoring Earth's high orbits and moving around and rendezvousing with other spacecraft. And that's also probably what the X-37B is going to be used for in public in order to go up and rendezvous with other satellites. But in reality, there's multiple purposes for both of these devices. We talk about how the only threat to satellites is not just something being shot up there with explosives, but also the ability to saddle up to an enemy's satellite and tap into it is also a threat. And that's why countries around the world are worried about the GSAP satellites, the 4 of them, and the highly maneuverable X-37B robotic spaceplane. Russia also started to develop its own version, I think, of the X-37B, and they snuck the stuff up into outer atmosphere with 3 mysterious payloads of what are supposed to be commercial satellite launches, but amateur hobbyists on the ground were able to spot 3 small objects that flew away from the jettisoned rocket booster and then returned back later. And people worry that these Russian maneuverable spacecraft might have sinister intentions, like being able to knock out other satellites, hook up into them, and gain data, or whatever the Russians are planning to do with these things. So it's clear that not only does the US have spacecraft up there, but so does Russia at this point. And it's the amateur hobbyist looking at the sky, just your average person, that is exposing this stuff, which might be why they're pushing so many psyops about space right now. So the Chinese are claiming everything is up there for peaceful science experiments, and the Russians are just staying quiet because they probably just don't want to blatantly lie about what they're doing. And both are basically just responding to the US clandestine development of potential space weapons, which we've already exposed were used on 9/11. And basically, any of the stuff they're putting up there can be repurposed into weapons of space war. and China and Russia have been pushing for a United Nations treaty to ban weapons in space, and the US basically is saying no because we have far more capability up there than anyone else and we have more to lose, so that's not going to happen. And basically there's no way to detect, even if we are cheating, unless we use those weapons on something like 9/11 or the Tianjin blast. So there's really no way to detect if anyone has weapons up there anyways. So basically this treaty is a non-starter. John Hyten of the United States Air Force Space Command says, "I hope to never fight a war in space." And later he says, "We have to have offensive and defensive capabilities to respond with," which tells me they already have offensive capabilities and they're admitting it. He says, "The one limiting factor is no debris. Whatever you do, don't create debris." And one of the things they have to take down enemy satellites is basically a giant trailer with an antenna on it, and people aren't sure how it works because it's all black operations stuff, but basically it looks like it's either up there to jam enemy satellites or hack into them. And also, if they have LENR directed energy weapons, they could just turn those satellites into dust like they did to the Twin Towers on 9/11, and that would leave no space debris because you're molecularly disassociating the object into dust, turning it into dust, not into debris, which is what they basically want to do, it sounds like. And at the end of the article, you can see they're talking about how there's already 20,000 quote-unquote weapons up there in the form of space debris, which is what they're using to justify the implementation of the Space Fence program. And now I'm going to let you watch a clip from Lockheed Martin on what the Space Fence program is, and then we'll discuss it afterwards.
Space is no longer a vast, empty void. Unprecedented quantities of new satellites, derelict satellites, and debris litter the skies, posing an imminent threat to America's space assets. Lockheed Martin's Space Fence system is a ground-based system of S-band radars designed to greatly enhance the Air Force space surveillance network. It provides unprecedented sensitivity, coverage, and tracking accuracy, and contributes to key mission threads with the ability to detect, track, and catalog small objects in low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, and geosynchronous orbit. In a word, Space Fence will revolutionize space situational awareness. It offers assured surveillance coverage for improved custody and features the capability to develop long arc tracks for accurate initial orbit determination and differential correction, while simultaneously maintaining a persistent surveillance volume. In today's ever-expanding space environment, Space Fence improves the accuracy and timeliness for association, propagation, and orbit improvement. It features an open architecture net-centric design. The closely coupled radar signal processing and mission processing suite improves accuracy, discrimination, and timeliness for detection of closely spaced objects, breakups, maneuvers, lost object location, launch, attitude change, and conjunction assessment. Space Fence not only tracks objects, but can precisely determine their projected orbit. This allows operators to reconstruct recent events, such as collisions or satellite breakups, and accurately predict future events. For high-interest objects, a microfence can be electronically constructed to gather more track data, focusing radar resources specifically on that object, providing more timely and accurate information. The Space Fence system includes up to 2 minimally manned radar sites, mission processing, and the system operations functionality. Each radar site features a design boasting closely spaced but separate transmit and receive arrays that are mission optimized for high availability and low lifetime support costs, including prime power. The dual aperture configuration offers efficiency and affordability. Each array is environmentally protected by a pressurized, electronically transparent radome. The arrays are continuously calibrated in the background, providing a higher degree of accuracy. Transmit and receive LRUs can be replaced while the radar is operating. The arrays, as well as the signal and mission processing suites, are fully scalable to fit any mission design. Array scalability is delivered using 3 low-cost, highly producible building blocks which permit easy growth capability. And by optimizing a second site with a smaller array and margin for future capability growth, the radar sites are cost-effective as well as powerful. As the Earth spins, the location of these radar sites provides assured coverage, and this coverage closes current coverage gaps, particularly in the southern hemisphere. The Space Fence system is net-centric and seamlessly integrated into the existing space surveillance network, providing services to external users such as JSPOC and coordinating handoffs to other SSN sites. It is designed for efficiency and full capability while minimizing bandwidth needs. The Space Fence system features a unique mission processor that utilizes the Air Force Space Command's A9 Astro Standards algorithms for high-confidence space track processing, low risk, and cost-effectiveness. The radar architecture is based on digital beamforming. This capability permits tremendous user-defined flexibility to customize volume surveillance and track sectors instantaneously without impacting routine surveillance functions. It has simultaneous search and track functions, detects significant UCTs, breakups, and maneuvers, and the flexible design supports operational resource allocation. Many of these operations are automated through machine-to-machine interfaces. This automation, along with user-defined operational picture displays, contextual GUIs, and unqueued LEO surveillance, reduces operator burden. The Space Fence team is comprised of Lockheed Martin, as well as AMEC, and General Dynamics Satcom Technologies. This partnership offers best-of-brand S-band radar, mission system and orbital mechanics, and construction expertise with superior responsiveness and transparency. Space Fence is a robust, flexible, advanced end-to-end system with net-centric communication, mission processing, enhanced cataloging capability, global coverage, and interoperability. It will meet the warfighter's operational needs, revolutionize space situational awareness, and will forever change the way we see the universe.
I haven't forgot who Lockheed Martin's working for either, and your little pentagram star is a dead giveaway. Now, as advanced as this technology may seem, it has some serious flaws to it. One being it's tied into the internet, which means it's hackable. And two, it's tied into all the other surveillance systems, and they pretty much admit that because it says it can access any of the satellites that are in the surveillance system or any of that. So what they're doing is not only watching space, but they're also watching Earth from space. So this is a dual-purpose surveillance system. It's not just to watch objects in space, it's also to watch objects on the ground. Another little interesting bit is all the objects are turned into cubes. So this is just more Saturn cube worship in my opinion, where all the objects shown floating around Earth were black cubes. And that's probably not just coincidence, considering the pentagram star and Lockheed Martin's logo and everything else tying them to the Illuminati. However, this system tied into weapon systems like directed energy weapons would be quite devastating. So let's go over the rise of directed energy weapons and how all of this stuff is coming out to the forefront. All the technology that was used to do 9/11 will soon be in the public arena. So not long ago, they would have told you you were insane if you said the government had directed energy weapons. Now it's becoming a global market, and they're making bets on it and saying it's going to raise 29% over the next 5 years, or 4 years, sorry. And this stuff always comes out about 20 years after it's been developed. So the black operations projects come out, and then about 20 years later, this stuff becomes public knowledge. And now we're seeing that because it's almost been about 20 years since 9/11. We're at like the 15-year mark. And by the end of this, by 2020, I guarantee the technology they used that day will more than likely be known to the public. So this report reads on, and it mentions the different companies that are advancing the directed energy weapon technology. Some of those are BAE Systems, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Finmeccanica, Israel Aerospace Industries, Saab, and the Thales Group. And as this market becomes more robust, more and more countries are now getting directed energy weapons, and it's becoming a standard in military applications. So Britain, India, and many other countries are now advancing directed energy weapons. See, this other article I found, it's talking about how Britain is to name a contractor for testing laser weaponry. And basically they've settled on using directed energy weapons in the laser setting. And they're working with various companies in order to do so. And they're really trying to advance this in order to get a ship-based laser weapon using directed energy technology. And they're advancing this technology pretty quickly because they feel like they need to catch up to the rest of the world. So they're saying in a field dominated by the US and German advances into directed energy weapons, the Brits are going to try to enter the fray by 2018 with a laser weapon of their own. And it's going to be a modified truck-mounted version of Raytheon's Phalanx, and I think that's a good idea because they'd rather spend money on developing the laser weapon than on the mount, and they're just going to use standard mounts for all these weapons. It also looks like the Indian Navy is setting its eyes on adding directed energy weapons to its naval surface fleet as well. And it says in the next decade they plan to add two things to their Indian Navy. One is one of these S-faced radar arrays, and the other are directed energy weapons. And they're basically advertising to add these to their ships in order to take down UAVs or some of the hypersonic weapons that are being developed. So research and development for DEW on warships worldwide has spawned several solutions that are currently undergoing sea trials. Soon we'll see the incorporation of DEWs in the very near future to many frontline warships. And the Indians are basically making a giant laser to attach to all of their ships. And this one they're building is called the Aditya. And the US already has these laser-based weapons, and they're far more powerful than what the Indians are trying to develop currently. And Northrop Grumman has plans in place to make a huge megawatt class design injection laser, which will likely make its debut in 2020. Now, the Illuminati may want sharks with frickin' laser beams attached to their heads, but they're not going to get that quite yet. They're first going to put laser beams on Apache helicopters. So you can see here, they've now moved the directed energy weapons from larger mobile applications to smaller mobile applications. And they're going to be equipping Apache helicopters with directed energy weapons in the very, very near future. This just shows you that DEWs are now becoming mainstream, and I would believe it won't be very long till we find out whatever DEW weapon was used on 9/11 and in Tianjin, China. And they envision using laser weaponries to destroy vehicles or generators instead of sending in a missile, because it saves them lots of money. And we all know this has nothing to do with saving money. We all know this is just because lasers are far more effective in warfare than a missile, because they move at the speed of light, there's no ammunition, so you can just fire as much as you want, and it costs less to fire. Now, they've already started equipping these things, but they're saying, oh, don't expect to see a Star Wars-like effect or a Death Star laser hanging off the side of a rotary wing aircraft. But they're equipping an AC-130 Ghost Rider gunship with a directed energy weapon by the end of this decade, so sounds like they are going to have that. And if you thought this was just going to be used at military installations and on warships, you're wrong. So this article is a death ray that can destroy drones from 6 miles away heading to an airport near you. And that's right, they're going to start installing directed energy weapons at commercial private airports. And they're going to do this because of the threat of drones. Like, I don't know, how many airports have been attacked by drones so far? 0? So that's totally legitimate. God, you gotta love how they just create these fears and then put it out there so they can justify the advancement of this crazy technology. I'm not so sure having directed energy weapons at airports is a good idea. Thank you very much for watching the first installment of Illuminati Space Wars. Now I'm going to end this, or almost end it, with a little clip from the Austin Powers film series that sort of makes light of all this stuff long before 9/11 ever took place. And the whole premise is they're putting the Alan Parsons, and Alan Parsons is the Illuminati insider who did the Babylon working, and it was a foster of Aleister Crowley. Now they're going to call it the Alan Parsons Project, and it's a giant moon laser, thus making it seem ridiculous that anyone would have a giant laser that's shot down at Earth. And we know they do because they're now putting them on Apaches. And I think they add stuff like this into movies so that when people come across someone like me researching directed energy weapons, they're like, oh, what, they have a giant, laser weapon in space? Yeah, I've seen that in a movie before. And then the automatic response from the mainstream public is, oh, that's all fake. I've seen it in a movie. You're watching too many movies, dude.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin phase 2 of our evil project. Or is it phase 3? I don't know phases. Anyways, this is the phase in which we put a giant laser on the moon. As you know, the moon rotates around the Earth like so. When the moon reaches its appropriate lunar alignment, it will destroy Washington, D.C. You see, I've turned the moon into what I like to call a Death Star. What?
Nah, nothing, Darth.
What did you call me?
No, nothing. Rip off!
Bless you. Anyways, the key to this plan is the giant laser. It was invented by the noted Cambridge physicist, Dr. Parsons. Therefore, we shall call it the Alan Parsons Project.
Oh my God.
What now?
The Alan Parsons Project is a progressive rock band in 1982. Why don't you just call it Operation Wang Chung, ass?
What should we?
Nothing, I'm sure Operation Banana Ram will be huge.
What are you saying?
If you
Wait,
want... Trying to be hip.
www.sh.com.org.
You so...
The YouTube comment section could really use a shush button. Just kidding. I love all the comments. Anyways, robotic satellite manufacturing is going to be the topic of my next Illuminati Space Wars video, along with 3D printing in space, the X-37B spacecraft, and some other things. So this little bit here is just a tiny little preview of what the next episode is going to be that I've already started working on. So thank you again for watching. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share. And I called this video GoldenEye because the Space Fence is going to be their Illuminati all-seeing eye in the world. And GoldenEye is just another occultic thing, which is why the James Bond movie GoldenEye was actually called that. So thank you again for watching, and please share this information so other people can see what's coming in the near future. And keep your eyes out, because I think the proof of what happened on 9/11 is going to be released in the next 4 to 5 years. We're going to find out what that technology was. So everyone should keep their eyes on that and forget about all the psyops. Alright, thanks again for watching, and I'll be back as soon as I can.